A cowboy rescued 3 Comanche widows. They repaid him with a wedding plan. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the wide, dusty plains of Texas, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and red. The wind blew hard, carrying the smell of dry grass and the faint scent of rain from the distant hills. In the middle of this vast land, a lone cowboy rode steadily on his horse. His name was Caleb, though few knew him personally, and even fewer had seen him without the wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He had traveled across many towns and open lands, searching for work, adventure, or sometimes just a place to rest his head for the night. The frontier was a harsh place, and every person had their own story of struggle, survival, and loss. Caleb's story was no different, though he kept most of it to himself, speaking only when necessary and always letting his actions tell more than his words ever could. That evening, as Caleb guided his horse along a narrow trail, he noticed storm clouds rolling in from the west. They were thick, dark, and heavy, moving quickly across the plains. The first drops of rain began to fall, hitting the dusty trail and soaking the cowboy's worn coat. He tightened his grip on the reins, urging his horse forward. Breath. He knew the storm would be strong, and being caught out in the open could be dangerous for anyone. The wind grew louder, whipping the tall grasses around him, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Despite the weather, Caleb pressed on, determined to find shelter before nightfall. As he rounded a small hill, he saw signs of life ahead. Smoke rose from the edge of a clearing, thin and wavering in the wind. Curious, he approached cautiously. There, at the edge of the clearing, was a small Comanche settlement. The houses were simple, made from wooden frames and animal hides, and the ground around them was muddy from the early rain. But something else caught Caleb's attention immediately. Figures moving quickly among the houses, carrying bundles of wood and trying to shield children from the storm. It was clear that the people here were struggling. Among them were 3 women, their faces lined with worry and grief. They moved quickly, helping each other lift supplies and secure their homes, all while keeping an eye on the children. Bess. Caleb recognized at once that they were widows. Their husbands were likely gone from a recent raid or a tragic accident, leaving them to manage on their own in this harsh environment. The sight tugged at his heart. He had seen suffering before, but the strength and courage these women displayed in the face of hardship was remarkable. But Caleb guided his horse closer, raising his hand slightly to signal he meant no harm. The widows froze for a moment, watching him carefully. One of them stepped forward, her dark eyes sharp and wary, and asked in a firm tone who he was. Caleb dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He introduced himself simply, saying he had been traveling and noticed the storm coming. He offered to help in any way he could, knowing full well that in this world, actions spoke louder than words. Past. The women hesitated. In their lives, outsiders were often met with suspicion, and trust was not given lightly. But Caleb's calm and respectful demeanor slowly softened their caution. They explained their situation, their voices quiet but steady. A recent raid had left them without enough food or firewood to get through the coming days. Their children were hungry, and the storm made it nearly impossible to gather supplies. Caleb listened carefully, nodding in understanding. Without hesitation, he offered to help them gather wood, repair the damaged shelters, and share some of the food he had brought with him on his journey. The eldest widow, named Takuma, was the first to accept his help. She gave a small nod and gestured for him to follow. Together they worked through the storm, the rain soaking their clothes and making the ground slippery. Caleb carried heavy bundles of firewood while the women helped their children stay dry. They spoke little, but Caleb could feel a quiet respect growing between them. The children watched him with wide eyes, curious and cautious, unsure of this stranger who had come into their world during such a difficult time. As the evening progressed, the storm grew stronger. Thunder shook the ground and lightning split the sky with blinding flashes. Caleb moved quickly, making sure the shelters were reinforced and that everyone had a safe place to stay. He showed them how to arrange the wood so it would burn longer, and how to keep the fire protected from the wind and rain. The widows watched him closely, learning from his knowledge and skill. By the time the first night fell, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the small group huddled around the fire in one of the more secure huts. Around the fire, Caleb noticed the exhaustion in their eyes. They had been through so much, yet they were still determined to survive. He shared stories of his travels to distract them from the storm, speaking of distant towns, open plains, and the animals he had encountered along the way. The children laughed at some of his tales, their first smiles in what felt like a long time. The widows, while weary, seemed to find comfort in his presence. It was not just the physical help he offered, but the reassurance that someone cared, someone was willing to stand with them in a time of need. As the night deepened, Caleb sat outside for a while, watching the storm clouds drift past the moon. He thought about the lives of these women and their children and how easily someone could be lost in such a harsh land. He knew the frontier was unforgiving, but he also believed that small acts of courage and kindness could make a difference. The next morning he would help them gather food, fix more of their homes, and perhaps even help them plan for the future. For now, though, he felt a sense of calm, knowing he had made it through the storm and had been able to lend a hand to those in need. In the following days, Caleb continued to assist the widows. He rose early each morning, helping them fetch water, repair shelters, and collect firewood. He even ventured into the nearby woods to hunt and bring back fresh meat. Each task he completed earned a little more trust from the widows, and gradually they began to share their stories with him. Stories of love, loss, and resilience. They spoke of their husbands, the raids, and the challenges of raising children alone in such a dangerous land. Caleb listened quietly, never interrupting, and sometimes offering advice or encouragement when it was needed. It became clear to Caleb that this was more than a simple act of charity. He was becoming part of their lives, and they were becoming part of his. He realized that the harsh frontier could bring strangers together in unexpected ways, forming bonds that were stronger than family or tradition. The widows, too, began to see Caleb not just as a helpful cowboy, but as someone who respected them and their culture. He did not impose his ways or judge theirs. He simply offered support where it was needed most. By the end of the first week, the widows' settlement had begun to recover. Fires burned steadily in their homes, the children were fed, and the women felt a renewed sense of hope. Caleb had proven himself to be reliable and brave, earning a place of honor among them, even if only temporarily. The storm that had first brought him here was long gone, leaving behind clear skies and a renewed sense of possibility. Though Caleb had entered their lives as a stranger, he left a mark that would not soon be forgotten. The widows, though still grieving, began to see a future where they could survive and perhaps even thrive. And Caleb, for the first time in a long while, felt that his travels had purpose, not just for himself, but for others who needed him in moments of true hardship. The days after the storm brought a new rhythm to the small settlement. Caleb had become a familiar figure among the widows and their children. Every morning he rose with the sun, his horse patiently waiting as he prepared for the day's work. The air was still cool, filled with the sense of wet earth and freshly cut wood. Birds chirped in the trees surrounding the settlement, a gentle reminder that life persisted even after hardship. The widows, Takuma, Nayeli, and Ayana, had begun to rely on Caleb in subtle ways. It was not just his strength or skill that mattered, but his presence. The children watched him closely as he worked, learning from his movements, and sometimes imitating him with sticks and stones in the yard. Caleb smiled at their attempts to mimic him, offering gentle corrections when needed. Though he was cautious to keep his role respectful, he felt a quiet pride in the progress the settlement was making. Each day brought new tasks and small victories. Caleb helped the women repair holes in their homes, reinforce their roofs, and build fences to keep the livestock safe. He showed them how to stack firewood efficiently so it would stay dry even in sudden rain. He guided the children to carry water safely, teaching them balance and patience. The widows watched him carefully, absorbing his instructions and sometimes offering suggestions based on their own knowledge of the land. A quiet teamwork developed, one that transcended the barriers of language, culture, and past mistrust. Despite these improvements, challenges were never far away. Bandits occasionally roamed the plains seeking easy prey, and wild animals could threaten livestock in a single night. Caleb remained vigilant, always scanning the horizon and preparing for any potential danger. But one afternoon, he noticed fresh tracks in the mud near the edge of the settlement. They were too large for deer and too numerous for a single traveler. He warned the widows and advised them to secure the children and animals. Tacoma nodded solemnly, guiding the children into the hut, while Nayeli and Ayana gathered the remaining supplies inside. The tension in the air was heavy, but Caleb's calm presence reassured everyone. Hours passed and the tracks never returned, leaving a sense of relief mixed with lingering caution. In those moments, the widows realized the depth of Caleb's reliability. He was not simply a helper. He was a protector, someone they could trust when danger was near. This realization grew slowly but steadily, forming a bond that was stronger than words could convey. Beyond the physical work, Caleb also shared knowledge that helped the widows plan for the future. He showed them which plants could be used for medicine, which roots could be safely eaten, and how to read the weather by watching the clouds and the behavior of birds. These lessons, while practical, were also empowering. The widows began to feel more confident, understanding that they could survive and even thrive despite the hardships they had endured. Their children listened eagerly, soaking up Caleb's stories and guidance, learning lessons that would serve them for years to come. One evening, as the sun set in a soft golden glow, Caleb sat outside with the widows and children. They had just finished a simple meal of corn and beans, cooked over the fire he had helped maintain. Tacoma spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. She thanked Caleb for everything he had done, expressing gratitude not only for the physical help but also for the care he had shown to their children. Nayeli and Ayana nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting a mix of relief, admiration, and growing trust. Bess, Caleb simply smiled, brushing his hand over his beard. He was not one for long speeches, but the warmth in his chest matched the firelight flickering across their faces. Over the next several days, the rhythm of life settled into a comfortable routine. Caleb continued to assist with repairs and chores, but he also began to take on more subtle tasks. He taught the widows how to mend torn clothing and patch broken tools. He showed them ways to store food to keep it fresh for longer periods. Slowly he became a part of their daily lives, not as a stranger but as a valued companion and ally. The children, once wary of his presence, now ran to greet him each morning, laughing as he playfully challenged them to fetch water faster or balance on a log. The widows, too, began to open their hearts in quiet ways. They shared stories of their past lives, speaking of the husbands they had lost, the homes that had been destroyed, and the nights spent in fear and uncertainty. Caleb listened without interruption, offering encouragement when appropriate, but never imposing his own opinions. He understood that grief was personal, and that healing required patience. Through these conversations, a mutual respect deepened. The widow saw Caleb as a man of integrity, someone whose actions reflected his words, and Caleb admired their strength, resilience, and wisdom. One day, a small challenge tested this growing bond. A sudden fire broke out near the edge of the settlement, ignited by dried brush and a strong gust of wind. The flames spread quickly, threatening the outer structures and causing panic among the children. Caleb acted immediately, guiding the children to safety and directing the widows in creating a firebreak. Together they fought to contain the fire, dousing flames with buckets of water and smothering small sparks with blankets. Hours passed, the sweat and smoke burning their eyes, but eventually the fire was under control. Not a single life was lost, and the damage was minimal. After the fire, exhaustion gave way to relief and gratitude. Tacoma, Nayeli, and Ayana approached Caleb, their eyes reflecting deep appreciation. They realized that his courage and quick thinking had saved not only their homes, but also their sense of security. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to feel hope, a fragile but real feeling that they could face future challenges together. Caleb, in turn, felt a sense of fulfillment. He had come into their lives unexpectedly, and in helping them survive, he had found a purpose that went beyond his own journey. In the following days, life returned to a steady rhythm, but the bond between Caleb and the widows grew stronger. They began to consult him on decisions, valuing his input while maintaining their independence. They planned together for future food supplies, repairs, and even ways to teach the children important skills. Each day, small gestures, shared meals, laughter, and quiet conversations strengthened the connection. The widows realized that Caleb's presence was not temporary. He was becoming a part of their lives in a meaningful way.
Caleb also noticed subtle changes within himself.
He had traveled the frontier for years, always moving, always searching. Yet in this small settlement, among these women and children, he felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He began to care not only for their survival, but also for their happiness, their well-being, and their future. He understood that true courage was not only in facing danger, but also in offering consistent support, kindness, and respect. By the end of this period, the settlement had transformed from a place of uncertainty into one of cautious stability. The shelters were repaired, the children were fed and protected, and the widows felt stronger, more confident, and less alone. Caleb's role was no longer just that of a helper. He had become a trusted friend, a protector, and a teacher. The small community thrived under his guidance, and the bonds forged in hardship became a foundation for future resilience. Though the days were still filled with work and occasional danger, the widows began to find joy in small moments, laughing with their children, sharing stories by the fire, and quietly observing Caleb as he worked. They recognized that his efforts were not simply acts of duty, but expressions of genuine care. Caleb, for his part, understood that his journey had brought him to a place where he could make a lasting difference, not through grand gestures, but through steady, persistent support. The story of Caleb and the three widows was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, respect, and the quiet heroism found in everyday acts of kindness. And as the sun rose each morning over the plains, painting the horizon with colors of hope, it was clear that this unlikely connection between a cowboy and three widows would shape their lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. The days passed, and the bond between Caleb and the three widows, Tacoma, Nayeli, and Ayana, grew stronger with every sunrise.
The work of daily survival continued, but now it carried a lighter spirit.
The widows, once weighed down by fear and grief, began to smile more often. They noticed how Caleb never sought praise for his help. He acted with a quiet patience that left them both amazed and grateful. And gradually, a thought began to take root in their minds. They wanted to repay him in some way.
"It was a simple idea at first," whispered in private while Caleb was tending the fire or helping repair a roof.
"We cannot let him leave without showing our thanks," Takuma said one evening, her voice soft and serious. Nayeli nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight, while Ayana furrowed her brow thoughtfully. "Bis, he has saved us, guided us, and kept us safe," she added. "We must do something meaningful to show our gratitude." The three widows began to meet in secret each morning, careful not to disturb the children or alert Caleb to their plans. They sat in a circle, leaning close together under the shade of a large tree, and spoke in hushed tones. They shared ideas and memories, recalling the bravery and kindness Caleb had shown. Each suggestion they made was tested against the traditions and customs of their people. They wanted their gesture to be sincere, respectful, and unforgettable, yet also meaningful in a way that honored both their culture and the cowboy who had come into their lives so unexpectedly. Days turned into a week, and their plan slowly took shape. It was not simple. The widows were determined to create something that would reflect their deep gratitude and recognition of Caleb's actions. They wanted to include elements that were symbolic: fire for courage, water for protection, and earth for life and sustenance. They discussed how to make the gesture personal, how to weave their customs with the reality of Caleb's presence.
Takuma suggested that it should be a ceremony, one that expressed both thanks and community.
Naeli suggested that the children participate, adding innocence and joy to the event.
Ayana, ever thoughtful, proposed that Caleb himself remain unaware of the full plan until the moment it unfolded, making the gesture a surprise that would reflect the spontaneity and sincerity of their appreciation. Meanwhile, Caleb continued his work, unaware of the secret discussions happening nearby. He rose each morning before the sun, prepared the fire, helped with chores, and tended to the children. He spoke little, choosing instead to act, demonstrating respect and care through deeds rather than words. He shared stories of his travels, of distant lands and challenging adventures, which entertained the children and often brought laughter to the widows' faces.
Yet there were moments when Caleb sat quietly watching the widows work and admired their strength, their wisdom, and the way they held themselves despite the hardships they had endured.
Little did he know, these moments were inspiring the widows to design a plan that would honor him in a way unlike anything he had ever experienced. As the days went on, the widows began gathering supplies for the ceremony. They collected flowers from the nearby fields, their colors bright and cheerful against the green of the plains. They wove them into small garlands, creating simple but beautiful decorations. They gathered clay and stones from the riverbed to craft small symbolic tokens, each representing a part of Caleb's journey with them. Even the children participated, helping to carry materials and practicing their roles under the careful supervision of the widows.
Each act, each small preparation, was infused with purpose and thoughtfulness. The planning also included practical considerations.
The widows knew Caleb was cautious by nature, and they wanted to ensure that the event would be safe and comfortable for him. They chose a clearing near the settlement where the ground was level and the view of the horizon was unobstructed. The space was surrounded by trees that offered shade and privacy, and a gentle stream ran nearby, adding the soft sound of water to the ceremony. Desk. Every detail was carefully arranged, from the placement of the fire to the arrangement of the seating, ensuring that Caleb would feel honored and welcomed without feeling overwhelmed. Despite the careful planning, there were moments of doubt. The widows worried that Caleb might misunderstand their intentions or that he would feel uncomfortable with the attention.
They discussed these concerns in hushed tones, reminding each other that their actions were a gesture of pure gratitude, not expectation or obligation.
"He has given us so much," Takuma said one afternoon. "We only wish to show him that his efforts have mattered, that he is seen, and that his kindness has left a mark on our lives." The others nodded, each feeling the weight and sincerity of her words.
The children, sensing the excitement among the widows, began practicing small performances. They learned songs, simple dances, and movements that represented aspects of their daily lives and the help Caleb had provided.
Breath. Their laughter echoed through the clearing as they stumbled and corrected each other, while the widows watched with pride and amusement. In these moments, the plan became more than a ceremony. It became a celebration of life, resilience, and community. Caleb had unknowingly inspired not just gratitude but joy, creativity, and hope. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrived. Early in the morning, the widows and children gathered in the clearing, placing decorations and arranging the space with care. Flowers were draped along branches, stones and clay tokens were set in meaningful patterns, and a small fire was prepared at the center. The children practiced one last time, their small hands gripping the garlands and sticks with determination. The widows took deep breaths, smoothing their clothing and sharing quiet words of encouragement.
Everything was ready, and yet the moment felt delicate. One wrong move, one misstep could reveal the secret prematurely.
Caleb, unaware of the preparations, was finishing his morning chores when Tacoma approached him. She called softly, asking him to follow her to the clearing. He raised an eyebrow, curiosity mixed with mild surprise, and followed without hesitation. The children trailed behind, their faces a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As they entered the clearing, Caleb was taken aback. The space was transformed, adorned with flowers and tokens, the fire crackling gently in the center, and the children standing in careful formation. The widows stepped forward, their faces reflecting a mixture of pride, gratitude, and anticipation. For a moment, Caleb said nothing. He simply looked around, taking in the scene before him. The effort, thought, and care that had gone into the preparations were clear, and he felt a deep warmth in his chest. He realized slowly that this was not a request or an obligation. It was a gesture of thanks, of recognition, of respect. His eyes met Tacoma's, and she gave a small nod, a silent signal for him to understand without words. The ceremony began with the children performing their small dances and songs. Each movement told a story of survival, courage, and community. Caleb watched, moved by their efforts and the innocence of their performance. The widows then presented the clay tokens and garlands, explaining their meaning in simple, heartfelt words. Each token represented a part of Caleb's journey with them, the courage he had shown, the protection he had offered, and the wisdom he had shared. Caleb was overwhelmed. He had never expected anything like this, and yet, in their eyes, he saw nothing but sincerity. The ceremony was simple, yet profound. It was not about grandeur or celebration. It was about gratitude, respect, and the deep bonds formed through shared hardship and kindness. The widows had repaid him in a way that honored both him and their culture, creating a moment that would remain etched in all their memories. As the ceremony ended, Caleb approached the widows, his voice quiet but steady. He thanked them for the gesture, expressing that the real reward had been the trust and friendship he had found among them. The widow smiled, knowing that the true repayment was not material but emotional, the bond they had built, the shared experiences, and the hope for a better future together. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the clearing remained alive with laughter, conversation, and the warmth of firelight. Caleb sat among the widows and children, feeling a sense of belonging he had never known before.
The ceremony had not only honored him but had strengthened the connections between everyone present. In that quiet moment he realized that the frontier, though harsh and unforgiving, had a way of bringing people together in unexpected, meaningful ways.
The plan the widows had devised was more than a simple repayment. It was a symbol of community, resilience, and gratitude. Caleb understood that his actions had inspired more than just survival. They had inspired hope, creativity, and joy. And in turn, the widows had shown that even in difficult times, gestures of kindness and recognition could forge bonds that would last a lifetime.
As night fell and the stars appeared overhead, Caleb helped the children to their huts and shared a final word with the widows.
"You have all taught me something as well," he said quietly. "Courage isn't just in fighting or surviving. It's in how you care for each other every single day."
They had repaid him with their ceremony, but in the process they had also shared their lives, their hearts, and their spirits. The memory of that day would remain with all of them forever, a testament to the power of gratitude, kindness, and the quiet strength of the human heart.
Caleb had come to the widow's settlement as a helper, but he left as part of their community, honored in a way that no words could fully capture.
And the widows, through their thoughtful plan, had shown that even small acts of recognition could create moments of profound meaning, bridging cultures, experiences, and hearts. The morning of the planned ceremony arrived quietly, with a gentle sunrise spilling soft light across the plains. The wind was calm, carrying the fresh scent of grass and dew. Caleb awoke before dawn, as he always did, and began tending to the small fire near the settlement. The children, already excited, whispered among themselves, their laughter barely restrained. The widows, Tacoma, Naeli, and Ayana, moved about silently, carrying garlands, arranging clay tokens, and making last-minute adjustments to the clearing where the ceremony would take place. Everything was meticulously prepared, yet the atmosphere remained calm, filled with a quiet anticipation that only those who had carefully planned such a heartfelt gesture could feel. Caleb, unaware of what was about to happen, followed his usual morning routine. He fed the horses, checked the supplies, and then began repairing a small fence that had loosened in the wind the previous night. His movements were steady and confident, but there was a lightness in his step he had not noticed before. He enjoyed these moments in the fresh morning air, the sound of birds, the distant rustle of animals, and the quiet presence of the people he had come to care for. Little did he know, a surprise was waiting that would forever change his understanding of friendship, gratitude, and community. As the sun rose higher, Tacoma approached Caleb with a gentle smile. "Come with us," she said, her tone soft but firm. Caleb raised an eyebrow, curious but unsuspecting. He followed her, with Naeli and Ayana trailing behind, while the children ran ahead to signal that everything was ready.
As they stepped into the clearing, Caleb stopped in his tracks.
The scene before him was transformed from a simple outdoor space into a vibrant area full of meaning, colors, and life. The fire crackled softly at the center, surrounded by garlands of bright flowers, clay tokens, and carefully arranged stones. The children stood in neat lines, holding garlands and small symbols they had made with care, their faces lit with excitement and pride. Caleb's eyes widened as he took in the effort. He had helped these people survive, yes, but he had never imagined such a gesture of thanks. The widow stepped forward, one on each side of him, their expressions a mixture of pride, gratitude, and quiet anticipation. For a moment, Caleb felt unsure how to react. He was accustomed to solitude, to solving problems with action rather than words. Yet now, surrounded by the people whose lives he had touched, he felt something new, a warmth, a sense of belonging, and an overwhelming gratitude that mirrored their own. The ceremony began with the children performing their dances and songs. Each movement told a story of their shared experiences, the long days of gathering firewood, the fear and strength shown during the storm, the laughter that had returned after the hardships. Caleb watched silently, feeling emotion rise within him. Every step, every gesture, was a reminder of the resilience and determination that had carried them through difficult times. He could see the effort the children had put into learning each step, and it made him smile. Their innocence, combined with the depth of meaning behind their performance, created a moment of pure beauty. After the children finished, the widows presented their gifts, simple but powerful symbols of gratitude. Each clay token represented a different aspect of Caleb's journey with them: courage, protection, and guidance. Each garland represented the lives he had touched and helped sustain. As they spoke, explaining the significance of each token, Caleb felt his chest tighten. He had never considered that his actions would inspire such careful thought and effort. He realized that this ceremony was not only about saying thank you, it was a declaration of the bond that had grown between them, a bond formed through hardship, trust, and shared experience. Caleb stepped forward to acknowledge the widows, but he paused, unsure of the proper way to respond. His life had been full of travel and survival, and moments like this were unfamiliar to him. Yet, in the depth of his heart, he understood the sincerity of their gesture.
He spoke quietly with words simple but honest. "You have shown me more than thanks."
Bet. You've shown me courage, hope, and strength. I am proud to know you, and I am honored by this. The widows smiled, understanding that his words, though few, carried great meaning. Then came the final part of the ceremony, the part the widows had carefully planned to surprise Caleb. They had prepared a symbolic wedding plan, not in the sense of binding him to any obligation, but as a gesture of ultimate gratitude and unity. Tacoma stepped forward, holding a small arrangement of flowers, while Nayeli and Ayana held the children's garlands. Caleb, Tacoma said, her voice steady but filled with warmth. We wish to honor you in a way that shows how deeply you have touched our lives.
You came to us as a stranger, and now you are part of our family, part of our community. We want to celebrate that bond.
Caleb blinked, momentarily stunned. The words wedding plan had been whispered among the widows, but he had not expected the meaning behind it. He saw the children looking at him with wide eyes, waiting for his reaction, and the widows standing tall, their faces reflecting the seriousness and joy of the moment. He realized that this gesture was symbolic, a way for them to acknowledge the depth of his contribution, his presence, and his care. There was no demand, no expectation, only recognition and respect. Slowly, Caleb understood. He smiled, a mix of relief, gratitude, and quiet amusement crossing his face. I don't know what to say, he murmured. I never expected anything like this. Tacoma stepped closer, her hand reaching out to rest lightly on his arm. You don't need to say anything, she replied. We only wish to honor you.
You have given us courage, protection, and hope. This is how we show our thanks. Nayeli and Ayana nodded in agreement, their expressions calm and sincere.
Caleb felt a warmth in his chest unlike anything he had experienced before, a deep, grounding sense that he belonged here, that his actions had meaning beyond survival. The ceremony continued with small songs and stories, each reflecting a lesson or moment shared between Caleb and the widows.
The children recited simple verses about bravery, kindness, and trust.
The widows shared short stories about the storm, the fire, and the days spent rebuilding their homes, emphasizing Caleb's role not as a hero seeking recognition, but as a steady, reliable presence whose actions had made a tangible difference. Despair. Every word, every gesture reinforced the truth of what they were celebrating. The bonds of respect, gratitude, and human kindness. As the ceremony drew to a close, Caleb joined the widows and children in placing the final tokens around the fire. Each token represented a memory, a lesson, or an act of courage. Together they formed a circle of recognition, a small but powerful tribute to the shared experiences that had brought them together. Caleb looked around at the faces of those he had helped, seeing not just gratitude, but pride, joy, and hope for the future. The realization hit him. This moment was more than a ceremony. It was a declaration that even in the harshest conditions, bonds could form that transcended fear, loss, and uncertainty. Later, as the sun began to set, painting the plains in golden hues, Caleb and the widows sat together around the fire. The children rested nearby, exhausted but happy. Caleb spoke quietly, his voice calm and thoughtful. I never expected this, he said, but I see now. It is not about what I did, but about what we have built together. You have given me a gift far greater than I could have imagined, the gift of trust, family, and friendship. The widows nodded, understanding that the true meaning of their ceremony was not in words or objects, but in the deep connection they had created. That evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, Caleb realized that the ceremony had changed everything. It was not about formal titles or obligations. It was about community, gratitude, and shared humanity.
The wedding plan had been symbolic, yes, but its meaning was profound.
It honored courage, loyalty, and kindness, and it celebrated the bonds that form when people support one another in times of need. Caleb felt honored, humbled, and more connected than he had ever been in his life. As night fell and the stars sparkled over the plains, Caleb helped the children to their huts and shared a final moment with the widows. "You have shown me that even small acts of care can create moments that last a lifetime," he said softly. The widows smiled, knowing that their plan had succeeded. They had repaid his kindness in a way that was meaningful, memorable, and heartfelt. And in doing so, they had strengthened not only their bond with Caleb, but also the sense of hope and resilience within their small community. For Caleb, the day would remain etched in his memory forever. He had come to the widow's settlement as a helper, expecting only the satisfaction of aiding those in need. But instead, he had discovered a community, a bond, and a depth of gratitude that surpassed anything he could have imagined. The ceremony, the symbolic wedding plan, and the children's joyful participation had shown him the power of human connection, the beauty of gratitude, and the quiet strength of kindness. And as he watched the flames of the fire flicker against the darkening sky, Caleb knew that this moment would guide him long after he had left the plains, reminding him that even in the wildest frontier, love, respect, and gratitude could flourish in the hearts of those willing to care for one another. After the ceremony, life in the small settlement changed in quiet but meaningful ways. Caleb, once a stranger passing through the harsh plains, had become an inseparable part of the widow's daily lives. He was no longer just a helper. He was a friend, a teacher, a protector, and an honored member of their small community. The bond they had formed was strong, built through shared hardships, trust, and the mutual care they had offered one another. Each day that followed the ceremony reminded everyone how deep their connection had grown. The morning after the celebration, Caleb rose with the sun, as he always did. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of dew on grass and the faint fragrance of flowers from the clearing. The children ran to greet him, their laughter echoing across the settlement. "Good morning, Caleb!" they called, carrying small garlands and tokens as if to remind him of the previous day's ceremony. Caleb smiled warmly at them, ruffling the hair of a little boy who had stumbled over a branch. The widows followed, bringing fresh food and water for the morning meal. There was a sense of harmony, a rhythm to their lives that had not existed before. Though the ceremony had been a symbolic gesture, its impact was profound. Caleb noticed subtle changes in the widow's confidence and independence. Takama walked with a steadier step, knowing that she had a trusted ally at her side. Naomi worked more freely with the children, teaching them skills she had once feared passing on alone. Ayana explored new ways to gather and preserve food, using techniques Caleb had taught her and combining them with her own knowledge of the land. Each action was a reflection of the balance between gratitude, strength, and shared responsibility. Caleb, for his part, found himself thinking differently about life on the frontier. He had traveled for years, moving from one town to another, always seeking work or adventure. He had been alone in his journey, relying on his skill and courage to survive. But now he had discovered something he had never known before. A place where he belonged, where his actions mattered not just for himself, but for a community that cared deeply about him. The ceremony had shown him that the bonds forged through kindness and respect could last a lifetime. In the weeks that followed, the small settlement thrived. Caleb helped the widows repair the remaining structures, expand their gardens, and strengthen the fences that protected their livestock. He taught the children to read simple words and numbers, using chalk and sticks to mark lessons on flat stones. The widows watched, grateful for his patience and guidance. Each day was filled with learning, laughter, and the occasional challenge. Sometimes a wild animal wandered too close, or a storm threatened their progress, but together they faced each obstacle with courage and resilience. One afternoon, a traveler passing through the plains stopped near the settlement. Curious, He observed Caleb working alongside the widows and children. He saw the harmony and cooperation in the small community and was impressed by the visible trust and respect shared among them. The traveler asked Caleb how he had come to be part of such a unique group, and Caleb simply smiled.
I came here by chance, he said,
but I stayed because I saw the strength and courage of these women, and I realized that sometimes helping others is the most rewarding journey of all.
The traveler nodded, understanding the truth in Caleb's words, and moved on,
leaving the settlement to continue its peaceful rhythm. The widows continued to honor Caleb's presence in small, meaningful ways.
They included him in decisions about their daily routines, planning, and teaching.
Tacoma would ask for his advice when repairing homes or organizing supplies. Nayeli consulted him when teaching the children or tending the gardens.
Ayana invited him to participate in her explorations of nearby land for resources. These actions were not formal obligations. They were expressions of trust, recognition, and shared responsibility. Caleb felt a sense of pride in knowing that he had become a partner in their lives, rather than a temporary helper.
Over time, Caleb's influence on the children became evident.
They grew stronger, more confident, and more curious about the world around them. They learned not only survival skills, but also lessons about courage, honesty, and empathy.
Caleb taught them how to observe the signs of weather, identify safe plants, and understand the movements of animals.
He also taught them about respect for each other, for the land, and for the bonds that held their small community together. The widows encouraged these lessons, recognizing that Caleb's guidance complemented their own wisdom and traditions.
As the seasons changed, the settlement faced new challenges, as the frontier always did. Winters were harsh, with biting winds and early frosts that threatened crops and livestock.
Summer brought droughts and wildfires, testing their resilience. Yet Caleb's presence and guidance allowed the community to adapt and endure. They learned to plan for scarcity, conserve resources, and work together in ways they had never imagined possible. Each challenge strengthened their bond, proving that the foundation they had built was not fragile but enduring. One evening, as the sun set in a spectacular display of gold and pink across the plains, Caleb and the widows sat together outside their largest shelter. The children had gone to bed tired from the day's work and play.
Caleb gazed at the horizon, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the storm that first introduced him to the widows, the days spent repairing their homes, the fire that tested their courage, and the ceremony that celebrated their shared experiences.
Each memory was vivid, a reminder of how far they had come together. Tacoma spoke first, breaking the silence. "Caleb, we cannot thank you enough for all that you have done," she said. "You did not just help us survive. You helped us hope again."
You showed us that even in the hardest times there is kindness, courage, and trust.
Caleb shook his head slightly, feeling humbled.
"I did what I could," he replied softly. "But you all taught me too."
You showed me what it means to be brave in the face of hardship, to care for each other, and to build something lasting. You've given me a gift I could never have expected,"
Nayeli added. "The children will remember you forever. They will carry your lessons, your stories, and your care with them wherever they go."
Ayana nodded, her eyes reflecting pride and warmth.
"Bray, and we will remember you too," she said. "You came into our lives when we needed hope the most, and now you are part of our family, part of our story." Caleb felt emotion swell within him. He had never imagined that a simple act of helping others could lead to such profound connection and gratitude. In the months that followed, Caleb's presence continued to shape the settlement's future. He taught the widows how to grow more resilient crops, store food efficiently, and manage resources wisely. Together, they built stronger shelters and developed routines that ensured safety, health, and stability. The children flourished under their combined guidance, learning skills that would serve them for the rest of their lives. The settlement, once fragile and vulnerable, had become a thriving small community, a testament to the power of collaboration, kindness, and perseverance. Caleb's influence extended beyond the immediate settlement. Nearby travelers and neighboring communities heard stories of the cowboy who had aided the Comanche widows, showing courage, respect, and unwavering support. People admired how he had earned their trust and gratitude without seeking reward or recognition. His story became a symbol of what could be achieved when individuals acted with integrity and care, and it inspired others to offer help, protection, and guidance to those in need. But as the years passed, Caleb and the widows maintained their strong bond. They celebrated small milestones together: harvests, birthdays, and moments of achievement for the children. They shared laughter, stories, and quiet evenings by the fire, building memories that would last a lifetime. Though Caleb had once wandered the frontier alone, he had now found a community that valued him, respected him, and included him fully in their lives. The widow's gesture of gratitude, the symbolic ceremony, had marked the beginning of this lasting connection, and it continued to guide their relationships every day. Caleb often reflected on the lessons he had learned. He understood that true courage was not only facing danger, but also showing kindness, supporting others, and honoring the bonds formed through shared experience. He realized that gratitude could inspire remarkable actions, like the ceremony the widows had planned. And he recognized that even in the harshest environments, people could create joy, stability, and lasting connection through trust, respect, and care. In the quiet moments, as the wind rustled the tall grasses and the stars sparkled above the plains, Caleb felt a deep sense of peace. He had come to the widow's settlement seeking little more than purpose and perhaps temporary refuge. Instead, he had discovered family, friendship, and a community that embraced him fully. The legacy of their time together was not measured in wealth or material gain, but in the strength of the bonds they had created, the lessons shared, and the hope that had been restored in their hearts. And so, life continued on the plains, marked by seasons, challenges, and the quiet beauty of shared human connection. Caleb remained a steadfast presence, a source of guidance and care, while the widows continued to grow in confidence, skill, and joy. The children flourished, carrying forward the lessons they had learned from both the widows and Caleb. Together, they built a life that was resilient, meaningful, and filled with the knowledge that even in the wildest, most unpredictable places, kindness, courage, and gratitude could transform lives. The story of Caleb and the 3 Comanche widows became a lasting tale of trust, bravery, and heartfelt connection. It was remembered by all who witnessed it as a true testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of gratitude, and the unexpected ways that lives could intertwine on the frontier. And in the quiet nights when the wind whispered across the plains, Caleb often smiled, knowing that the journey that had begun with a storm and a chance encounter had led to something far greater than he could have imagined. A family, a home, and a legacy of kindness that would endure for generations.